What's up guys, Agent here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Magicka Sorcerer, specifically the non-pet build here. So I've already released the pet build for the Mag Sorc. This is for those of you guys who don't want to play for a pet, whether that's because of personal preference or because your raid lead does not permit you to use pets at all as a Magicka Sorcerer. So with the exclusion of the pet, that does open up a few skill slots for us to use, and so we do gain a little bit of flexibility when it comes to flex spots, but generally speaking, a non-pet Sorc is going to pull lower DPS than a pet Sorc. So just keep that in mind. If you do want to play a non-pet Sorc, your ceiling probably won't be as high as an equivalently skilled Magicka Sorcerer that is able to run a pet. So Harrowstorm didn't really bring that many balance changes, so not much has changed between this build and the build that I released for Dragonhold. Some minor set changes here and there, and some minor skill changes, but overall not that big of a change here. Harrowstorm didn't really introduce anything super groundbreaking. So we won't be going over gear. That is covered in the gear video, which should be popping up in the upper right hand corner right around now. So go ahead and check out that video and then come back here for the skills and the rotation. So let's go ahead and get started here with skills. A little bit different from Dragonhold. I did change up a few skills here just to kind of fit the Sorc theme a little bit better. So for our front bar, we are still running Crystal Frags and Elemental Weapon. Alternatively, you can also run Force Pulse if you don't have access to Elemental Weapon. They're both perfectly fine to run. Then we have Endless Fury. This is going to be used for Execute. This was not there for the Dragonhold build, but I decided to add it back in for the Harrowstorm build, just because the DPS difference is fairly small, regardless of whether we used it or not. And it can be useful in sort of trash fulls to get some additional Magicka back by using Endless Fury. So always nice to get some more sustain as a Mag Sorc, because that's definitely one of our weak points. Then Haunting Curse. Bound Aegis, we can run Inner Light rather than Bound Aegis. The difference is 1% max Magicka, but Inner Light also provides you with additional 2% Magicka regen, so it might help you sustain a little bit, not too much. But Bound Aegis also provides Minor Resolve, so a little bit of additional survivability as well with Bound Aegis, so you can pick whichever ability you want to have here. And we have Greater Storm Atronach. If you want just raw cleave damage, you can run this Destro Staff Ultimate, or you can run something like Shooting Star if you want some additional Magicka and Magicka regen from the Mages Guild line. But Greater Storm Atronach will give you 2% additional spell damage, which is going to be a little bit more returning if you're just looking for just raw single target damage. On our back bar, we are running Mystic Orb, Unstable Wall of Fire, Boundless Storm. So we are assuming that we're able to be within that 5-meter radius of the boss in order to proc Boundless Storm, or say in order to be able to damage things with Boundless Storm. If you're not able to be within melee range, if you can't run Boundless Storm, then you're better off running something like Inner Light or Bound Aegis again for the additional max Magicka there. You kind of don't want to run another dot because that will cut into sustain a little bit more, and I personally found that just adding in Bound Aegis improved our DPS about comparable to just adding an additional dot. The downside of running additional dot is you're cutting your sustain down, so you might need to basically use heavy attacks more often or use spell symmetry more often, and you won't be able to use another spam bolt in place of that. So you're kind of making a few trade-offs here, so I personally would say just stick with something like Bound Aegis or Inner Light if you can't run Boundless Storm. Then we have Barbed Trap. You can run the other source of minor force here if you have access to the Citric Order line, which is Channel Acceleration. So Channel Acceleration will be better if you cannot be within melee range to proc Barbed Trap. Then we have Spell Symmetry. I mentioned this in the pet video, but we're using Spell Symmetry mainly to help us sustain on the trial dummy when we do our parse at the end of the video. In an actual raid, you probably won't need to use Spell Symmetry because you do have more sources of sustain that you have in raid that you don't see on the trial dummy. So if you're in a situation where your sustain is fine in raids, you don't need to run Spell Sim, you can replace this with something like Inner Light, Bound Aegis, you can run another dot here, so it's kind of up to you how you want to play around with this. So other dot options you might want to consider running, if you don't need to run Spell Sim, would be something like Lightning Flood, if you need the conduit synergy, if you need to give it out to your tanks for L-Clash, for example. You can also run something like Destructive Reach or Soul Trap or Degeneration. You have a couple of options when it comes to single target dots that you can run in place of Spell Symmetry. Then we have Greater Storm Atronach again. So this is definitely the strongest ultimate that we can run as a Magicka Sorcerer. And that pretty much covers all of these skills. Now let's go ahead and talk about the rotation. So going to be a little bit dynamic here because our dots don't really line up very well. So Mystic Orb and Unstable are both 10 seconds, but Boundless Storm is 23 seconds. Trap is 18. Haunting Curse is essentially 12-second long duration, so it's going to be a little bit dynamic. The general rule of thumb is to just keep an eye on your dots and re-up them when necessary. So obviously, the most important dots to maintain would be Arming Trap and Blockade of Fire, or Unstable Wall if you're running that morph for the Maelstrom bonus and the Minor Force, and then from there everything else just sort of falls in place from there. So you can get some downtime on your dots, especially Haunting Curse, but you do want to re-up them as soon as you're able to. So the rotation itself, again, fairly dynamic, so we're going to demonstrate on the 3 million dummy. Oops, didn't want to use that. Our dots ran out, so we just want to re-up them. We are not getting lucky with Crystal Frag procs. Alright, there we go. Got another Crystal Frag procs. We'll break our front bar rotation so we can activate Boundless Storm and continue with our front bar spammable. Now, when you get your Crystal Frag procs on the front bar, make sure to use it right away. That is because Crystal Frag procs do not stack on each other. You can't save them up. So if you use Elemental Weapon and you get a Crystal Frag proc, but you don't use it and you use another Elemental Weapon, let's say that one ends up proccing another Crystal Frag, that first Crystal Frag proc is essentially wasted. It's overridden by the second Crystal Frag proc that you got. So you basically wasted a Crystal Frag proc. So you want to avoid that as much as you can because Crystal Frag procs do improve your overall sustain, and obviously it's a very nice burst of DPS, so make sure to use them right away. So as soon as you see it proc, don't use any other Magicka ability on the front bar, just make sure to use your Crystal Frag proc right away. Now there might be instances where you use an ability and you have to go to your back bar right away to re-up Unstable Wall or something. If you happen to get a frag proc there, it's fine. You can just let it sit while you're re-upping your back bar dots and then just cast it immediately once you get back on your front bar. Now we are running Endless Fury, so once we hit around 20% health remaining, that's when we're going to start using it. That's the execute range for Endless Fury. So once we hit that range, we'll stop using Elemental Weapon or Force Pulse and use Endless Fury instead. So we're going to go ahead and do our 21 million dummy parse here. So kind of said this in other DPS videos, but this parse is not indicative of in-raid performance. So in an actual raid environment, you will have various buffs and debuffs that are not present on a trial dummy. Most notably, things like sustain bonuses. You don't have Symphony of Blades, you don't have Hollow Fang, you don't have the Massive Restoration Staff on a trial dummy. So you will be having better sustain in raid compared to in a trial dummy. In addition, the trial dummy is missing a few buffs, debuffs I should say, that you would see in an actual raid, things like Martial Knowledge, Zen's Redress, Major Vulnerability, so we're missing a few debuffs here, so that will affect our overall DPS as well. Yes, we are getting 100% Major Force, which is very unrealistic, if not impossible in an organized raid group, but that is somewhat tempered by the fact that we are missing some other important debuffs that you should have in an organized raid group. So this parse should be used to compare the DPS across various classes on the trial dummy, not as an indication of in-raid trial performance. So go ahead and get started here. Oh, I don't think I am hitting the dummy. No, I can't target the dummy. I might need to... Yeah, I'm going to need to reset the dummy and place it back somewhere. A position where I can actually hit it. Yeah, it's not registered. There we go. I can hit it, but I do need my ultimate back, so we're just going to get our ultimate back and then do the parse again. Apologies for that. I thought I had the dummy set up so I could hit it, but turns out I did not. So we'll just get our ultimate back and then do the parse again. Which is interesting because my AoE dots were able to hit it, but I'm guessing that's because you don't necessarily need to target it in order to be able to hit things with AoE dots. So once we get our ultimate back up, we will redo the parse again. good. Let's go ahead and reset the dummy. And let's go ahead and do parse. There we go. Now I can target it. You notice here that when I went back to my front bar, I immediately got rid of the proc first before I recast Haunting Curse. There's the small possibility that if I recast Haunting Curse before I used a frag proc, it would end up proccing another frag, which would end up being a DPS loss. We would be missing that frag proc. So what I did there was something you want to avoid, so I recast Haunting Curse before I cast a Crystal Frag proc. And there's no way to tell whether or not that Haunting Curse cast would have re-upped my Crystal Frag proc. Add-ons wouldn't be able to tell me that because they only track whether it's active. It's a yes-no, basically. And if it's already active, well, you can't have more yes. Now for Stork parses, there is a little bit of RNG involved with how lucky you are with Crystal Frag procs. Sometimes you'll have a long string where you're not getting any of them. Then sometimes you'll get like 4 or 5 in a row. What they normally end up normalizing in the end. Again, it might be hard to believe that sustain will be better in a raid environment, but just trust me, it will be. We are using Ghastly Eyeball to kind of mimic or get as close as we can to actual in-raid sustain, but in-raid sustain is still better than what we have right now. While we are getting Worm from the Trial Dummy, we are missing a couple other important sources of sustain like Symphony of Blades, Hollow Fang. You're getting really unlucky with frag procs right now. Alright, we're about 24% health, so once we hit 20%, we are going to be using Endless Fury rather than Elemental Weapon. Probably end up starting, yeah, we're starting now. We're still going to use Crystal Frag procs as they happen. The only difference that we've made is the fact that we're using Endless Fury rather than Elemental Weapon. Just make sure you're still using those Crystal Frag procs when they happen. Alright, so there we go. That is your non-pet Sork DPS here. We managed to pull 79.6k, 79.7k. If you guys remember, our pet build pulled about 83k, so we are losing about 3k DPS just from dropping our pet. Yes, pets are that strong. At the very least, Twilight Tormentor is that strong. If you're running the Twilight Matriarch, it's going to be closer to probably about a 1 to 2k difference in DPS. But it is substantial enough that Pet Sorcs are going to be the preferred Magicka Sorcerer build setup for some trial guilds. Now, you'll notice here that our Magicka is not that great. Our sustain's not fantastic. We were below 50% for a good portion of the fight, and while a trial dummy might not necessarily be representative of an actual length of an actual boss fight in a trial, it's not also unrealistic especially for progression groups. So just keep that in mind here when you're playing a Mag Sorc, that you will have a little bit harder time sustaining compared to classes like the Magicka Nightblade or Magicka DK running the Asylum Destruction Staff. So this is the big weakness. This is the Achilles heel of Magicka Sorcerers, the fact that our sustain is just not that great. But that concludes this build video. Hopefully you guys found this informative. So again, let me know down in the comment section below if you guys have any questions about the build. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.